has never been obtained from a human being. People should understand that. Retrovirus...
Never been cultured from a human being.
Never been obtained from a human being.
What does that mean?
For example, like if you have hepatitis or flu or a cold or measles or chickenpox, any viral disease, you can take a sample of blood, or at least from the wound or the pox.
You can culture it.
Don't even have to culture it. There's a virus there that you can quantify without even culturing. You can culture, but typically you can spin it in a centrifuge and get a little bit of it in a vial, and you can quantify it. It will be infectious, viable virus that you got directly from the patient. If you put it into another human being, that will infect the other human being. That has never been done with HIV.
That's just really hard to believe. I mean, that's some of Koch's postulates. I mean, that's who's the guy who was the infectious disease, father of infectious diseases,
yeah,
who says you have to do that to prove that actually a disease is caused by a particular organism.
Well, HIV led the bandwagon where you can basically invent something out of thin air and turn it into a multi-billion-dollar, hundreds of billion-dollar industry. Another example would be the hepatitis C, which is even acknowledged by Chiron, which used to exist, the company that made the original hepatitis C test, that they never ever actually obtained hepatitis C. They just got bits and pieces of it and then inferred what this virus must be. And people to this day are being tested for something that has never ever been obtained from a human being.
Now, is there an association between people who are HIV positive and tend to get AIDS?
Yes, it's an association by definition.
Okay.
In fact, you cannot get AIDS by definition unless you have antibodies to HIV.
So you can find the antibodies to HIV virus. Does that mean that the virus is there if you can make an antibody against it?
No, it does not. In fact, the presence of the antibody, that's the principle of immunization. It means that your immune system is won out and it's defeated the pathogen, the virus, and it's gone. That's, for example, if you've ever had measles or the chickenpox. You will have antibodies to it, but the virus is not detectable.
So when somebody has something like mumps or measles or chickenpox, and they have antibodies, the illness is done.
Exactly.
They don't have the antibodies when they're sick. And that's exactly the situation you're saying about HIV and AIDS.
That's right. They generate it over time, and that's how they defeat the viral infection. But it's even worse than that. The inserts that come with the antibody test for HIV say explicitly in there that they have no reference standard to determine whether or not the antibodies that they detect positive in the test actually have anything to do with HIV. They don't even know if those antibodies are really from HIV because they have no reference standard. And then over the course of my being a scientist and being confronted with the contradictions of the results of the research data, you have to scratch your head and you say, wait a minute, retroviruses are not sexually transmissible. Nobody's ever obtained a viable sample, free infectious HIV from a human being. What's going on here? And it was clearly by certainly 1985, all up to 87 for sure, that AIDS itself was not a contagious disease. It stayed within the same risk groups. It was 8 out of 9 AIDS cases to this day are still male, and 60% are gay men.
So an infectious disease shouldn't be able to discriminate between one person and another, should it?
There's no virus that knows whether you're white or black, gay or straight, rich or poor, or what zip code you live in, except HIV, apparently.
Would you have any idea why the CDC is saying that this is an STD and that we should be careful? It's a sexually transmitted disease?
This is area for speculation.
Crystal Meyer, who has proven that the HIV virus does not exist. You found out that what looks like the HIV virus is actually a gene in our immune system.
Yes, I found out by doing research that the genes of our immune system, which are called human leukocyte antigen genes, are the cause for testing positive because they are very variable. And by gene expression, we produce RNA and proteins, and these just make the test positive. But nothing is coming from outside. It's a production from inside, and it does not mean that we are sick or have a disease.
Another problem you point out is that the HIV tests are not standardized.
Yes, the tests are not standardized. They vary all over the world. So you can take a test in Africa and fly with your result to France. if you were tested positive in Africa, you are negative in France. And let's say you test positive in Germany, go with your result to Australia, there you would be named negative.
So, Crystal, what is your view of the treatment for this non-existent virus? Does it actually harm people?
The medical treatment in the beginning was really hard because it was a high doses of ACT, acetotumidine, and this really disturbs DNA, and this was a problem for those who had to take the medication because they died of the drugs.
You mentioned that certain flu vaccines had to be withdrawn from the market because the people who take these vaccines could test positive for HIV.
Yes, there was recently a flu vaccine that was retracted from the market. They did not say they retracted it because of the positive testing after the vaccine, although it is in the leaflet, but they said because of small side effects.
So it's actually in the leaflet that if you take this vaccine, you can test positive?
Yes, it's in the leaflet.
So that means somebody who takes a flu vaccine could be falsely diagnosed with HIV and given these harmful drugs?
Yes, it's like this. And also you see, people are trying to find a vaccine against HIV. And if you give a shot against HIV, you will test positive. That's normal, because after vaccination you test positive for the antibodies.
Why do so many people in Africa test positive for the HIV virus?
Africa is just a special genetic factor because people have different genes. That does not mean they have disease genes, they just test more often positive because of their background.
So basically the HIV test is testing for a certain genetic factor?
Yes, it is testing for gene expression factors.
It's testing actually then for a genetic factor which is very common in Africa?
Yes, it's testing for this, and it's more common in Africa than in other parts of the world.
And African people then receive this very harmful treatment?
Yes, if healthy people receive the harmful treatment, this really is a genocide.
Why do you think so many homosexuals are diagnosed with HIV?
Homosexuals might have an overload of proteins which make them positive in the test, and also in former times, I don't know if now, homosexuals took some drugs to have a better feeling, and they just had problems with drugs, and this also turned the test positive.
So there is no correlation between homosexuality and HIV?
There is no correlation between homosexuality and the virus. There might be some allergy against the proteins from the partner, but this is like a normal allergy and not a disease, but this could just render the test positive.
So it sounds to me, Crystal, as though this is a kind of genocide against people in Africa, against women who are producing the next generation of children, and against homosexuals. Would you agree with this?
I agree that this is a genocide.
Not a single HIV sexual partner, HIV negative sexual partner, became HIV positive during this. Nobody has ever demonstrated that an HIV negative person becomes HIV positive via sexual intercourse.
That's just shocking.
It is.
He's saying that the literature that we have, the medical literature, the scientific literature, is no longer believable.
That chronic use of heroin and cocaine and amphetamines and the poppers, the nitrite inhalants the gay men use almost exclusively.
So all you're saying is that these people with these kinds of lifestyles have immune deficiency problems.
That's right.
And it's acquired.
Right.
Okay, so it's AIDS.
Right.
Now we talk about treating acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, with drugs that are very toxic.
Right. The chemotherapy for cancer, basically.
So it's doing more to suppress the immune system.
It does, and they're extremely toxic drugs. There's not an HIV drug on the market that does not come with a black box warning label. That's the most serious warning that the FDA puts in a label before they pull the drug off the market. MDs, basically, physicians, practitioners, do not read the scientific literature.
So they're basically following CDC recommendations.
Yeah, that's true, but they also, you know how they learn about drugs, the pharmaceuticals? They learn about the drugs from
the drug company.
The drug salesman.
That's right. A
that
lot of
sends
the time
it to
that's
them.
true.
You know, they don't read the primary literature.